The cold at Kivalina was the kind that had opinions. Dr. Abel Marsh had been aboard the Resolute for 11 weeks and had treated 6 cases of frostbite, 2 of exposure, 1 broken collarbone from a fall on deck ice, and 1 infection that had required him to take 2 fingers from a deckhand named Polly, who accepted the loss with a stoicism Marsh found both admirable and vaguely troubling. He had learned to dress in layers that added 10 pounds to his frame. He had learned that the wind off the Chukchi Sea carried a particular malice in the hours before dawn, as if it had been building resentment all night and finally had somewhere to direct it. He had not learned to sleep well. He lay in his bunk most nights listening to the ship work against the ice and thought about his wife in Portland and his daughter, who had turned 4 in October and would turn 5 without him. He thought about warm rooms. He thought about the specific weight of wool blankets on cold nights. He catalogued these comforts the way a miser counts money, with attention and a private pleasure that required no audience. It was November when Harwick brought the ice aboard. The shore party had gone out at first light. Harwick, Olsen, the Inupiaq hunter they called Simu, and 2 of the younger men, Baird and Foss. 6 hours of hunting, and they'd come back with 3 seals and a look on Harwick's face that Marsh initially read as the focused exhaustion of cold work. It was something else. "Found something on the shore ice," Harwick said, in Marsh's cabin, with the door shut. He set the sample on the examination table. It was a chunk of ice roughly the size of Marsh's fist, wrapped in canvas, and the canvas had a stain on it the color of old rust. Marsh unwrapped it. The ice was red, not the red of blood, though his mind went there first out of occupational habit. Deeper than blood. The red of something internal, the red of a thing that had no business being seen from the outside. It was clear in the way ice is clear, you could see through it, but the color suffused every part of it evenly, as if whatever had tinted it had done so before it froze rather than after. "Where exactly?" Marsh asked. "Sure, maybe 200 yards from the water's edge. Simu says he's never seen it. Won't touch it." Harwick paused. "When I picked it up, Simu stepped back. Not like a man surprised. Like a man who recognized something." He looked at the canvas-wrapped sample on the table. "He said a word I didn't know, and then he said it again. Quieter, the way you say something when you're reminding yourself of it. He wouldn't translate it. He just stood back and watched me wrap it up, and he hasn't spoken directly to me since." Another pause. "I touched it with my bare hand before I saw the color. Thought it was just ice." Marsh looked at him. "How long?" "Minute, maybe. Less. I dropped it when I saw what it was." Marsh examined Harwick's right hand. Nothing unusual. The skin was red from cold, but red in the ordinary way of cold work skin. Blood close to the surface, radiating heat. He pressed the palm. Harwick winced, but that was the pressure, not anything deeper. "Any sensation? Numbness beyond the usual?" "No." Harwick watched him. "What is it?" "I don't know," Marsh said. This was the truest answer and the least satisfying one, and Harwick received it with the expression of a man who had expected it and resented it anyway. Marsh kept the sample locked in his cabinet. He noted it in his log in the careful, non-committal language of a man who knows that what he writes may be read by others. Unusual ice formation, red coloration, unknown cause, sample retained for study. He examined it under his lens for an hour. It looked like ice. When a small amount melted at room temperature, it produced red water, thin and clear as dye, that ran across the glass plate with a surface tension slightly wrong. Not enough to name, just enough to notice. He wiped it up carefully. He told himself it was mineral contamination, iron perhaps, leached from the rock shelf. It was a reasonable explanation. He held it in his mind like a candle against the dark. He did not examine Harwick's hand again that night. This was the mistake he would turn over for the rest of his short remaining life, examining it from every angle, finding no version in which he could have known. 3 days later, Harwick came to him again. The right hand had changed. The redness that Marsh had attributed to cold exposure had not faded the way cold exposure fades. Instead, it had deepened and spread to the wrist, and under Marsh's lamp in the close quarters of the examination cabin it had a quality that stopped his breath for a moment before his training reasserted itself. It was the same red as the ice. Not identical. The skin was still skin, still Harwick's weathered and work-roughened skin, but the undertone, the quality of the color beneath the surface, was the same thing he had seen in the sample, the same depth, the same sense of interiority made visible. "Is it frostbite?" Harwick asked. His voice was steady. He was a steady man. Marsh ran his examination with thorough and deliberate calm. The temperature of the affected tissue was normal. Sensation was intact. Harwick could feel the probe at every test point. No blistering, no blackening of the tissue margins, none of the cellular death markers he associated with genuine frostbite. The hand was warm, perhaps warmer than the corresponding left hand, though the differential was slight enough that he noted it with a question mark. Warm. The word sat in his chest with a weight he didn't immediately understand. He prescribed rest from cold work, wrapped the hand in a clean dressing, and told Harwick it was likely a deep surface inflammation responding to repeated exposure. He said this with the confidence of a diagnosis while writing in his log with the uncertainty of a question. He sent Harwick back to his bunk. He went to his cabinet. He looked at the ice sample, which had partially melted in the warmth of the cabin and was now half water, red and still in the glass container, surface tension slightly wrong. He sat down. He thought about warmth, about the hand's temperature, about the rate at which the redness had spread in 3 days from palm to wrist, and what 3 more days of the body's own heat might do. He thought about what he would do if a man came to him in a cold environment showing signs of something moving through his tissue, what the training said, what every manual said. Keep the patient warm. He thought about Polly's stumps bathed in warm water every morning. He thought about the compress he had pressed to the wounds with his own hands, holding the warmth in, encouraging the blood flow, doing exactly what the textbook demanded. He thought about every cold environment protocol he had ever read, every lecture from his training, every field manual in his bag. An unbroken chain of received wisdom, passed from doctor to doctor across generations, and every single link of it had been pointing in the wrong direction. He was not a man given to despair. He had chosen this work precisely because it gave him problems that had solutions, bodies that responded to correct intervention, outcomes that rewarded careful practice. He had believed in this the way other men believed in God. He sat with that for a long time in the close cold cabin of the Resolute, while the Chukchi sea pressed against the hull and the wind found every gap and every seam and the lamp burned with its small orange certainty, and he felt the first clean spike of dread move through him like a blade between the ribs. By the 5th day, 4 more men were affected. Baird and Foss, who had been on the shore party, showed the same deep redness in their hands. Polly, whose bandaged stumps Marsh had been changing every morning with careful warm water and fresh dressings, had it spreading from the wounds, which Marsh understood with a horror so precise it bordered on academic, because he had warmed the water himself, had pressed warm compresses to the skin, had done everything correctly, and in doing so had done everything wrong. The 4th was a man named Creel who had not been on the shore party and had not been in contact with the sample and had, as far as Marsh could determine, never touched Harwick or any of the others. He had shared a meal with Baird 2 nights ago. They had sat close in the way men sit close in cold quarters, shoulders touching, sharing the warmth of proximity the way the body does without instruction. Marsh put Creel in isolation and stood outside the door afterward and pressed his forehead against the cold metal of the wall and breathed very slowly and thought about what he knew. He knew it spread through contact. He knew warmth accelerated it. He was beginning to understand, with the particular sick clarity of a man trained to read bodies, that warmth did not merely accelerate it but fed it, that the substance moved toward heat the way a plant moves toward light, that the body's own furnace was the engine of its spread. He knew that the Resolute was a wooden ship in November on the Chukchi Sea and that the alternative to warmth was death by other means. He wrote these things in his log in plain language because the time for careful non-committal language had passed. Harwick lost the hand on the 7th day. Not to surgery. Marsh had been building toward the decision, steeling himself for the conversation, calculating at what stage amputation ceased to be salvage and became merely a delay. But Harwick came to him at 6 a.m. with the hand already wrong in ways that moved the decision past medicine and into something else. The redness had gone fully through it. Not on the surface now, through it, the way light goes through glass, the tissue itself suffused. The hand was warm, the warmest part of Harwick, as if it had become a small furnace, and under Marsh's lamp it cast a faint red shadow on the examination table. Harwick looked at it with the same steady expression he brought to everything. "Take it," he said. Marsh operated for 2 hours. He worked in the coldest part of the ship, the forward hold, which he had converted to a surgical space partly for the sterility of the cold air and partly because he had begun to understand that warmth was a thing to be carefully managed. He kept the heat low. His hands shook from it. His instruments were cold, and his breath fogged in the lamplight, and Harwick lay on the table with his jaw set and did not make a sound. The tissue, when Marsh cut through it, was red all the way to the bone. He removed the hand at the wrist. He cauterized. He dressed the stump. He was thorough and correct in every technical sense. And when he disposed of the severed hand in the cold water over the side of the ship, he watched it sink and saw that it left a faint red dispersal in the dark water, brief as breath, before the current took it. He went back inside. He stood in the lamplit warmth of the main cabin with the 7 healthy men remaining and understood that the warmth on their faces and in the air between them, the warmth they had crossed 3,000 miles of sea to preserve themselves against the cold, was the thing that was going to take them. He tried to explain it. He found language for it in pieces, the way you find your way in a dark room by reaching. The men listened. Some of them understood before he finished. He saw it in their faces, the moment the logic arrived. The cold outside, the warmth inside, and the thing that moved between the two following the gradient like water finding the lowest point. Simu, who had refused to touch the ice on the shore and whose expression throughout the last 7 days had carried the specific quality of a man watching something he already understood unfold, said one thing before leaving for the coldest part of the ship where he sat without complaint in temperatures that made the other men's teeth ache. He said, "The red water is from the other cold, the deep cold, the cold that has no heat in it anywhere." Marsh wrote this in his log. He didn't know what it meant. He knew it was true. The end came quickly once it came. Not because the healthy men were careless, because they were human, because men in crisis reach for each other, grip arms, press close, share the warmth of breathing the same air. Because Marsh himself, treating Foss in the final stages, put his bare hand against the man's face in the instinctive gesture of a doctor assessing fever, the oldest assessment in medicine, skin to skin, and felt the deep red warmth of it, and knew the moment his hand came away what he had done. He noted the time in his log. He did not treat his own hand. There was nothing to treat. He wrote for the remaining hours with methodical care. Everything he had observed. The timeline, the vectors, the rate of spread relative to body temperature, the behavior of the substance in cold versus warm conditions. He wrote the account of the shore discovery. He wrote Simu's sentence about the other cold and underlined it without comment. He wrote instructions for whoever found the ship, clear and precise, the most useful thing he could still offer. He wrote one more thing that was not for whoever found the ship. He wrote his daughter's name, and beneath it her age, and beneath that the specific color of her hair in morning light, which he had been cataloging against forgetting since October, and which he now committed to the page with the care of a man who understands that this is the last time he will do it. He did not write anything else about her. There was nothing else that paper could hold. His hand was warm, warmer than the other. He kept it away from the lamp. Outside, the Chukchi Sea moved in the dark with its ancient indifference, and the cold pressed against the hull, and somewhere in the forward hold Harwick was still alive, he thought, perhaps, and the ship was very quiet in the way that ships go quiet when most of what was living in them has stopped. He finished his entry, he dated it, he closed the log. He'd put both hands flat on the table and looked at them in the lamplight and waited with the patience of a man who has done everything he could and knows it was not enough and finds, in that knowledge, something that is not quite peace but is close enough to hold on to. The lamp burned. The red moved. The cold outside had no heat in it anywhere.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.